Welcome back to the Maria Montessori Project. Thank you so much for your interest in my dream of dramatizing what I'm calling a practical life. Those of you who are familiar with the Montessori method know there's an area of the classroom called the practical life area, and it actually is symbolic of one of her most profound discoveries about the child, which is that children, young children before the age of 3 are engaged, and 4 are engaged in what she called indirect preparation for their big breakthrough discoveries of reading and writing. Um, the story famously is told that when reporters came to observe Montessori's demonstration class when she first was developing her method and showing it to the world, they asked the children who were 4, 5, and 6 years old how, and they were reading and writing, and they said, "Well, who taught you to read?" And the children looked in astonishment at the reporters and said, Nobody taught me. I learned myself." And that is kind of the sort of big insight that Montessori had, that education is not something that we do to children, it's something they're doing. And she wrote in her book, The Absorbent Mind. I'm just going to let her say it in her own words for you. Um, and so we discovered that education is not something which the teacher does, but that it is a natural process which develops spontaneously in the human being. In other words, you don't have to motivate kids to want to learn. They're born wanting to learn. They're born learning. She goes on, education is not acquired by listening to words, but in virtue of experiences in which the child acts on his environment. So, action for Montessori is absolutely critical to education. Children can't learn if they're not allowed to move, if they're not allowed to use their hands and feet and their whole bodies and engage in a process of discovery. So she says, and this is where many teachers feel a little bit threatened sometimes, I think, because they're not sure then what their role should be in the classroom. So she says, the teacher's task is not to talk, but to prepare and arrange a series of motives for cultural activity in a special environment made for the child. So, this discovery that children are um, equipped to learn, and they're actually, through their engagement with the environment, absorbing everything around them and making it part of themselves. This incredible discovery gives her life this feeling of a before and after feel to it. So before she figured this out about children is one stage of her life, and then after, her life takes a very different direction. So what I've been trying to figure out, of course, is how to tell this story. And I spoke recently with a friend of mine, Robert Tobin, who is the artistic director of a theater company here in Chicago, called Aston Rep. And Robert's not just the artistic director, he's a very accomplished actor. He is a playwright, a screenwriter as well. And so I was asking him on his advice of whether this would make a play or not. And he was encouraging me to try to write it as a play. So I thought I would give it a shot, even though her life has a huge historical arc to it. I think I'm going to try and write a play, uh, or at least a treatment for a play. Let's put it that way. Robert suggested I write a treatment and try and write a scene. So I think I will, and I think what I've been pondering is that maybe the play would start at the either when she was in medical school or either just starting or just finishing, because she was the first woman to attend medical school and become a doctor in Italy. She got her medical degree in 1896, and it launched her into huge prominence in Italy and in Europe as a woman who was changing what it meant to be a woman in that day. I mean, it was the beginning of women, not the beginning, but an exciting time in the women's rights movements. And she was speaking at women's rights conferences after she got her degree and so forth in Italy and in Europe. So um, I thought maybe that would be a good place to start. But as background, I'm trying to understand, who is this person who arrives at this moment in her life where she's the first woman doctor in Italy. Who was she? How did she get there? So I've been doing some background work on trying to understand who she was as a child, um, which is really kind of an interesting question, since she was since children were so important to her. Who was she as a child? And also, what did it mean to be a child in her time and place? Maria was born um, in 1870 on August 31st, and 1870 happens to be the year in which Italy was unified for the first time. I have a map of the northern part of Italy behind me here, just to let you know that, and see, I've been having my head stuck in a map because I've been trying to understand this moment in history in which she was born. And I've been reading and relying on, I mean, I'm not a historian, and I don't think I'm going to be able to master uh, this time period perfectly, but I've been relying on this one book by Christopher Duggan called The Force of Destiny, and it's a history of Italy since 1796. It's actually an excellent book if you have any interest in Italian history. It's well written and well worth a read. But her father fought in the war against Austria, um, for liberation of Italy from Austria, and Italy was just a bunch of regional, provincial mini states, and one of them was the Papal States, which extended. This is just the northern half of Italy, so here's Rome on this map. And at that time, um, the the rule, the dominion of the Pope wasn't just this little postage stamp Vatican city that it is now. It extended. It was a big region across central Italy called the Papal State, something like that. Anyway, her father, after he fought for unification, ended up working as a government official in the Papal States, and his work took him to Caravali, which is a small town on the eastern coast of Italy on the Adriatic Sea, which is where Maria was born in 1870, the year of unification. And then in 1875, Alessandro Montessori's work took him to Rome. And so when Maria was 5 years old, they moved to Rome. Her mother and father were both very patriotic and very much in favor of unification and liberation from Austria and from France. Um, and they also were, I think, well, her mother was very religious, um, but I think they were both very suspicious of papal authority or of authority in general. Um, the spirit of the time was very much of the people were getting together and creating a country that they wanted to live in. It was a very exciting time, a lot of hope and possibilities, very much akin, I think, to um, perhaps how we felt in the U.S. after the revolution. It's like, oh boy, now we get to do what we want to do, and make of this country what we want it to be. And that was the spirit in Italy at the time. Um, so both her parents were, as I said, very patriotic. Um, so they're in Rome with their, and it turns out Maria was an only child. She never had any siblings, and it's not clear to me why that is. It's one of the questions I actually have in doing my research is um, why didn't her parents have more children? Was it intentional? Was it just, because they couldn't have more children? So anyway, I'm hoping to figure something out about that. But I do know that her mother was very uh, supportive of her daughter. Her mother was a bit of a women's empowerment person herself, um, very much believing that women could do more than what the convention at the time had, which was, stay home, get married. Your ambition was to get married and have children, and women didn't really have much economic rights. Apparently, men ran the banking accounts and wrote the checks. Women couldn't even write checks, that sort of thing. So. But her mom had a strong faith in her own daughter and what her daughter could do. And I think her father very much wanted Maria to conform to expectations. He was much more conservative in that way than Maria's mom. I want to share with you a couple of stories of her from her childhood that are told in her two biographies that and repeated in other places as too by other friends of hers. Um, and they're sort of the standard ones. And I'm still trying to figure out what to make of them. But I want to share them with you and engage you in that process with me. So, one thing that I found very interesting is that this is from uh, Rita Kramer's biography of Maria. Um, she writes that Maria was not a precocious child. According to her grandson, she was considered a sweet, not especially bright little girl, and that was how she thought of herself. Apparently, she excelled in women's work in school, like in first and second grade. She received awards for good behavior, for sewing and needlework, and that sort of thing. Um, and it's said that Kramer writes when Maria saw a classmate crying because she hadn't been promoted to another class, Maria couldn't understand her emotion. One room, she told the other girl, seemed just as good as another. All the classes seemed the same to her. To me, it's like part of why she didn't excel in school is she wasn't really engaged at school. Everything just sort of seemed uninteresting. Nothing was really capturing her attention, it seemed to me. Um, but she did, and apparently also she wanted to become an actress, as many young girls do. And she didn't really focus on an academic career, but it seemed that by around maybe second, third, when she was 7 or 8 or 9, she started to get feedback from the teachers that she was doing well academically, and she thought, oh, I'm good at this. Well, maybe I'll apply myself. So she began to work a little harder, and she began to excel in her studies. So the narratives go. Um, Maria Montessori never wrote her own memoirs, so we have some information in her own uh, voice from letters and some interviews that she gave. But all of this is passed down from stories being told about her. Um, Apparently, her mom uh, was very also involved in social awareness, social activity. It was sort of the feeling at the time um, that there was a lot of room for improvement. Italy was very backwards as far as education went. Very, I don't know what the literacy rate was, but it wasn't good. They weren't. Italy was behind the rest of Europe in the literacy rates, and there was a huge movement from the south of Italy. The poor were being driven out of the farms and countrysides and flooding into big cities like Rome looking for work. And Maria's mother was, I think, very much engaged in trying to help um, the poor and the uneducated. And one of the things she had Maria do every day was knitting for the poor. I don't know exactly what that meant, but this is from a very reverential biography of Maria by a friend, E.M. Standing, a younger friend, but someone who very much studied with Maria and admired her very much. Um, he tells the story that there was a hunchbacked girl in Maria's neighborhood who Maria took pity on and made us friends with and made an effort to walk with her every day and to be friends with her. Um, so he's trying to uh, point out her sense of empathy with other people and other children, which I think is real. Certainly, um, that sort of empathy is not uncommon in young children. If you give them space, um, they're very in tune with your feelings and very sensitive to it. In fact, as an aside, um, we showed my little 2-year-old granddaughter um, the the Peanuts Halloween show, the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. And I don't know if you remember it very well, but there's a scene in which Schroeder is playing the piano, and the music makes Snoopy cry. Um, when little Grace, my granddaughter, saw this, she started crying because Snoopy was crying. Okay, she's very in tune with dogs, so a dog crying was very upsetting. But she's very empathetic when her mom is crying. If her mom cries about something, which mommies sometimes have tears in their eyes. Gracie gives her a hug and tells her it'll be okay. She brings her a tissue. She does for her mom what she sees Emily do for her, which is empathize and take care of her and tend to her needs. So young children are very empathetic. We don't always notice it, but they are. And I think Maria was one of those kids, very empathetic. She also could be a little bossy. Um, there's these wonderful stories of her um, kind of disapproving of her peers. So apparently, when she played with groups of children, she ended up being the leader. Um, and that she would make unexpected remarks if someone um, didn't behave according to her plan for the group, I guess. I'm not sure exactly what the children did that would get this comment, but she would say, why, you are not even born yet, to dismiss this child. Um, so there was also something else she said. You're not even born yet. Oh, and she also said, um, remind me later that I've made a vow never to talk to you again. This is, a young, I think, elementary age. Their ages aren't given for these anecdotes, but I'm thinking 8, 9, 10, something like that. Because again, this is not uncommon. in young children to, get their pride pricked or whatever it is. Um, and it doesn't mean that they're evil or something's wrong with them. It's just, we all have moments when we react in ways to what other people are saying that just is very upsetting to us. There's a wonderful story of a teacher who spoke about a look that Maria had in her eyes, and she didn't want to see that look anymore. Sure it was Maria rolling her eyes at the teacher or something. And as a protest, apparently, little Maria never raised her eyes in the presence of that teacher again. She never looked up. Stubborn. So we have a quality of stubbornness, of a little bit of bossiness, of a lot of empathy. Um, and I've been asking myself, what what can we discern about her? If I'm going to write a play that begins with her as a 18 or 20-year-old, what's the background piece I want to bring with me um, into this character? And I think that part of what I've been wrestling with and trying to figure out is that her mom's affirmation and faith and support in her was very strong. And I think that it gave her a certain perspective on the way other people reacted to her, even the way her father reacted to her. I mean, at that time, women were really viewed almost the way children were viewed, actually, when you think about it, as not being capable of all that much. You know, um, know your place in society and occupy it. That's what children were told, basically. And that's what women were being told as well. And Maria was being given a different message from her mom than that. And I think it's possible that combined with something in her allowed her to dismiss the negative feedback, if you will, and latch on to the positive feedback that she was getting. So if someone, you know, gave her a sideways glance or acted in a way that it sent her a message that devalued her, she didn't take it on. Um, and I think that's part of who she was as a person, and also part of who her mom wanted her to be. And that may be the essential quality that I would want to convey. It very early on, when in this play, when you first meet this young woman, there's so many obstacles in her way, and we'll talk about that in the next video, about the obstacles she encountered just to get into medical school, and then when she was there. It was very difficult. That there was something about her confidence in herself, but there was also a sense of a growing awareness for her that she had a particular role to play in this society and culture in which she was born. She saw things about it that other people didn't see, and she began to sense that there was a particular mission, role, calling for her. And I think that self-confidence, that quiet confidence, um, it was the beginning of her taking on this larger mission, which is to um, recognize the role of children to renew culture and to make possible more peaceful future. So I hope you found that interesting, that you'll continue to watch. Um, and that you'll visit the Facebook page, which is called the Maria Montessori Project, Dramatizing a Practical Life. So we can have a conversation there or right here on YouTube. I really appreciate your comments and any ideas you have about making sense of these little stories of her childhood and what kind of child she might have been. And if you have any knowledge of the time period of the late 1890s, early 20th century, what it was like for women and children at that time, I'd love to hear from you too. So thanks so much. See you next time.